The cold night air felt suffocating against Mayan's skin as the audio recording looped endlessly in her mind, each second of Jungkook's mocking voice stripping away the warmth of the evening. Dirty, uneducated village girl like her. Inside the glowing greenhouse, Jungkook was still holding out his hand, his dark eyes shining with an earnest, hopeful warmth that now felt like a cruel, calculated trap. Mayan didn't scream, she didn't throw her phone at his feet or let the hot tears streaming down her face betray her shattering soul. Instead, a dead, absolute stillness settled over her heart, the kind of cold silence that comes right before an absolute collapse. She stepped back from the doorway, her voice barely a whisper against the wind. Don't come near me. Mayan, what's wrong? Jungkook took a step forward, his brilliant smile instantly faltering as he saw the blood drain completely from her face. Is it my father? Did something happen at the estate? Mayan turned on her heel and walked away. She didn't run. Her steps were measured, straight and precise as she moved past the white rose garden and down the stone path toward the main house. Mayan, wait! Jungkook called out, rushing out of the glass enclosure. But by the time he reached the grand foyer, the front heavy door clicked shut with a definitive hollow snap. Upstairs in her private room, Mayan locked the door behind her. The illusion was over. She pulled a single worn canvas duffel bag from the top closet shelf, the exact same bag she had carried with her 8 months ago when she first stepped into the glided cage. She didn't pack the silk gowns, the designer heels, or the expensive jewelry Chairman John had gifted her to secure her place in the family. She packed only 3 simple cotton dresses, her old handwritten teaching journals, and her personal identification papers. From the top drawer of her mahogany desk, she pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside sat the formal exit documents and the divorce petition draft. With steady, trembling fingers, she picked up a black fountain pen and signed her name at the bottom of every single page in dark, unyielding ink. By 3 a.m., while the massive estate was shrouded in deep, heavy sleep, Mayan carried her canvas bag down the back servant stairs, slipped out through the side iron gates, and stepped into a waiting local taxi. She didn't look back at the Grand Gion mansion once as the car sped toward the express bus terminal, leaving the city and her broken heart behind in the dark. Jungkook barely slept a wink. He had spent the entire night pacing back and forth in his private study, clutching the small velvet ring box in his jacket pocket, trying to convince himself that Mayan was merely overwhelmed by the sudden romance or exhausted from her CSR Foundation work. At 6 a.m., unable to endure the suffocating silence a second longer, he walked down the quiet corridor to her bedroom. He stood outside her door for a quiet moment, taking a deep breath to settle his erratic heart before knocking softly against the heavy mahogany wood. Mayan, he called out, his voice low and unusually gentle. Are you awake? Let's talk about last night, please. Only silence greeted him. He waited a bit, his brows furrowing. Mayan, I'm coming in. He slowly turned the polished brass handle. The door swung open smoothly, revealing a room bathed in the pale grey light of dawn. The bedroom was pristine, cold, and entirely devoid of human warmth. The grand bed was made with mathematical perfection, the sheet crisp and untouched. The wardrobe, the doors stood slightly ajar, revealing rows upon rows of untouched designer dresses, tailored suits, and glittering jewelry. But the bottom shelf, the space where her worn canvas duffel bag had sat since the day she arrived, was completely bare. Jungkook's chest constricted with the sudden agonizing panic. Mayan, he took a frantic step into the room, his dark eyes scanning the space until they locked onto her writing desk near the terrace window. Resting at the exact center of the dark mahogany surface was a thick manila envelope. Resting directly on top of it, it was the simple platinum wedding band he had placed on her finger months ago. Catching the dim morning light, Jungkook walked toward the desk with heavy trembling step, as if approaching a crime scene. With shaky fingers, he picked up the top document from the envelope. Mutual dissolution of marriage and settlement agreement. Petitioner Jeon Jungkook. Respondent Wayan. Status fully executed and signed. Tabbed beneath her thin black signature was a small handwritten note. I have fulfilled my obligation to Chairman John and kept my word. Do not look for me. The document trembled violently in his grip. The floor seemed to tilt beneath his feet as a cold, suffocating wave of pure horror crashed over him. She hadn't just walked away for the night, she had erased herself from his life completely. The quiet stillness of the master bedroom shattered as Jungkook's furious call echoed down the marble hallway. Within minutes, the estate security detail and personal staff stood lined up in the study, heads bowed under the suffocating weight of their master's rage. What do you mean by nobody saw her leave? Jungkook roared, slamming his fist onto the mahogany desk. The sharp cracked echo through the room like a gunshot. We have 30 security cameras monitoring the gates. Where is the footage? Sir, the perimeter feed for the west gate was manually overwritten at 2:30 a.m. The chief security officer stammered, cold sweat running down his neck. Someone with internal administrative access bypassed the system. Jungkook's eyes went dark, dangerous and razor sharp. Internal access. His mind raced through the inner circle, the few people who had the security clearance, the motive, and the ruthless efficiency to orchestrate a clean exit. Before he could bark out another command, his private line vibrated on the desk. It was a security tech, the private intelligence firm he kept on personal retainer. Speak, Jungkook demanded, snatching up the phone. Mr. Jeon, we traced the origin of the audio file sent to Miss Wayan's secondary device last night. The lead analyst reported steadily. The digital fingerprint points back to a temporary relay server hosted in Singapore. However, the original voice recording was spliced from a private board meeting audio log recorded 3 years ago, completely taken out of context and patched with synthetic voice modulation. Jungkook's breath hitched in his throat. The piece of audio Wayan had here, it was a carefully constructed forgery designed specifically to destroy her trust in him. Who purchased the server? Jungkook asked, his voice dropping to an icy, terrifying quiet. The transaction was cleared through a shell subsidiary under Han Group. The analyst replied, authorized directly by Yoonji's personal secretary. A deadly silence fell over the study. The pieces trembled into place with sickening clarity. Yoonji hadn't just tried to undermine Wayan socially, she had executed a targeted strike to rip her away from him completely. And Wayan, hurt and vulnerable, had walked right into the trap. Jungkook slowly placed the phone back on its cradle. He picked up the signed divorce paper resting on his desk. His jaw set in a rigid line of absolute resolve. Get my car, he ordered, looking at his chief of security with eyes that burned with pure steel, and trace every express bus leaving the central terminal toward the southern provinces from 3 a.m. onward. I don't care if you have to search every town in the country. Find her. Jungkook tore out of his private study, his long coat fluttering behind him like a storm cloud. Assistant Jimin struggling to keep pace as they headed toward the grand foyer. Have the car brought to the front doors, Jungkook ordered, his voice echoing furiously through the towering marble archways. I want us in Hanam before noon. You will not step foot outside the state executive director. The booming, fragile voice cut through the hall like an iron blade. At the base of the grand staircase stood Chairman Jeon, leaning heavily on his carved mahogany cane. Though his skin was pale from his recent medical scar, and his breathing was raspy. His dark, commanding eyes burned with absolute unyielding authority. Two personal physicians hovered nervously behind him, but the old man shoved their hands away. Jungkook stopped dead in his tracks, his jaw clenching tightly. "Father, please step aside. I don't have time for this." "You don't have time?" Chairman Jeon snapped, his cane thumping hard against the polished marble floor. "Secretary Kang just informed me that Mayan's room is empty and a signed divorce petition was left on her desk. What did you do to her, Jungkook?" "It was Yoonji," Jungkook yelled, his usual corporate restaurant completely vanishing as raw frustration boiled over. "Yoonji fabricated an audio clip, a spliced recording from 3 years ago, and sent it to Vayan. She made it sound like I was using her, like I thought she was beneath me. And why would Vayan believe such a recording so easily?" Chairman John countered, stepping forward, his voice dropping into a spare, piercing register. "Because when she first walked through these doors, that is exactly how you treated her. You treated a precious woman like a transactional core to satisfy my final wishes. Did you not?" The heavy hall fell dead silence. Jungkook opened his mouth to fire back a cold defense, but the words flittered in his throat, his breath caught, his chest aching as if he hit by a physical blow. The chairman's words struck the rawest, most agonizing truth in his soul. Slowly, the defiant posture drained from Jungkook's tall frame, his shoulders slumped, his finger trembling as he slowly dragged both hands down his face. "I ruined it, father," Jungkook whispered, his voice cracking violently as tears of pure shame and desperate heartbreak welled in his dark eyes. "I ruined everything. When she first came here, I was arrogant, cruel, and bitter. I thought she was just an obstacle, but I was wrong. I was so damn wrong." Chairman John stared at his son, his fair expression softening just a fraction as he saw the icy, unapproachable executive director break down into a raw, desperate human being. "I don't care about the contract anymore," Jungkook choked out, looking up at his father with bloodshot, pleading eyes. "I don't care about the board, the merger, or the family legacy. I love her, father. I love her so much. It's driving me insane, and if I lose her, I have nothing." The chairman let out a long, heavy sigh, closing his eyes briefly as he leaned onto his cane. "Then go," the old man said softly, his tone quiet but firm. "Go to Hanam. But do not expect a woman of her pride and pure heart to forgive a fool easily. You bring my daughter-in-law home, Jungkook, or don't bother coming back yourself." The sleek black SUV tore down the narrow gravel lanes of Hanam, kicking up a thick cloud of dust against the vibrant green persimmon fields. Jungkook sat in the back seat, his tailored suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened at his collar, his fingers frantically tapping against his knee as the GPS counting down the remaining meters. His heart pounded wildly against his ribs, a desperate, frantic rhythm he had never experienced in his life. The vehicle screeched to a sudden halt outside a modest traditional wooden house surrounded by a low stone wall and a sprawling vegetable garden, Mayan's family home. Jungkook threw the door open before the driver could even step out. His polished leather shoes slammed into the dirt road as he sprinted up the heavy wooden front gate, pounding his fist frantically against the frame. "Mayan," he called out, his raw, desperate voice shattering the quiet rural air. "Mayan, please open the gate. Let me talk to you for 5 minutes." The heavy iron latch rattled and the wooden gate swung open with a slow, loud crack. Mayan's father stepped out onto the gravel threshold wearing simple, worn working clothes. His face was battered from years of hard labor in the field, and his expression was set in a stone cold wall of quiet, burning hostility. Standing right behind him was her uncle, holding a heavy wooden frame rake, his jaw tightly set. "Get off our land, Mr. John," her father said, his voice low, gravelly, and unyielding. "Please," Jungkook begged, taking a step forward, his hand raised in a corporate front. "I know how this looks, but it's a massive misunderstanding," Unji altered an old recording to manipulate her. I just need 5 minutes to speak with Vayan. Please, sir, just let me see her face. My daughter came home before sunrise in tears, carrying the exact same canvas bag she left with 8 months ago. Her father's part, taking a step forward and shoving Jungkook back with the heavy, callous hand against his chest. Jungkook stumbled back onto the dirt road, his immaculate white shirt getting smudged with dust. You high and mighty Seoul executives thought you could buy her integrity, use her to play a happy family for your sick father, and discarded her when you were finished. Her father continued, his dark tired eyes flashing with fierce parental protectiveness. She wants nothing to do with you or your money. Get off our property before I call the village elders and have you thrown out. I am not living without her. Jungkook instead, his dark eyes wide with desperate pleading intensity as he tried to push past them toward the courtyard. Vayan, I know you can hear me. Vayan, get lost, her father barked with the sharp final push. Her father slammed the heavy wooden gate shut right in Jungkook's face. The thick iron bolts slid into place with definite echoes in the chest clank. Inside the quiet courtyard, Vayan stood near the porch window, her hands trembling as she held a porcelain cup of hot tea. Tears spilled silently down her cheek as she heard his desperate voice calling her name from behind the gate. But she forced herself to stand completely still, refusing to take a single step forward. By late afternoon, the clear skies over the valley dissolved as heavy swollen storm clouds rolled over the hills of Hanam, plunging the quiet village into a dim, gloomy grey. A torrential summer downpour began to fall, pounding violently against the zinc roofs of the village houses and turning the gravel dirt roads into sleek, treacherous mud. The rain came down in relentless and unforgiving sheets, turning the afternoon light into a near twilight. Jungkook did not return to the warmth or safety of his luxury SUV parked down the lane. He stood directly outside the locked wooden gate, completely drenched. His expensive tailored suit was soaked through, clinging heavily to his broad frame, while streams of ice-cold rainwater ran down his pale face, sticking his dark hair across his forehead. His polished leather shoes were sunk deep into the rising mud, but he refused to take a single step backward. Inside the house, the quiet rhythmic of rural life went on, though an unbearable tension hung over every room. Vayan sat by the paper screen window in the modest living room, staring out into the grey courtyard. Through the wooden slats of the gate, she could clearly see his tall, rigid silhouette standing unmoving against the storm. Her father walked into the room carrying a small wooden tray with two steaming porcelain cups of barley tea. He sat it down on the low table, his weathered face filled with cold concern as he looked at his daughter. He is still out there, Vayan, her father said softly, sitting down across from her. His voice carried no anger now, only the tired, protective gravity of a parent watching his child suffer. The rain is turning into a full gale. It's going to drop below freezing in the hills tonight. He's going to get severely ill if he stays out there like a fool. Vayan didn't turn her head away from the window. Her face remained devoid of emotion, though underneath the table her fingers gripped the thick fabric of her linen dress so tightly her knuckles turned white. Let him stay, father, Vayan whispered, her voice barely audible above the heavy drumming of the rain on the roof. He is an executive director. He is used to getting whatever he wants simply by snapping his fingers or throwing money at people. He thinks if he makes a grand gesture, everyone will bow down and give him what he desires. When he realizes his money and status mean nothing here, he will leave. Her father looked at her for a long moment, noting the quiet tremor in her breath before letting out a slow, heavy sigh. He didn't push her, he simply poured the tea and left the room. Night fell over Hanam, bringing with it a biting bitter chill and thunder that rumbled maniacally across the valley. Lightning that flashed across the black sky briefly illuminating the lonely figure outside the stone wall. Jungkook's body shivered uncontrollably under the icy deluge. His hands were numb, his lip turning a dangerous pale shade of blue as the cold seeped deep into his bone. His vision blurred under the continuous pour of water, his legs trembling from the sheer physical strain of standing upright for hours without food or rest. Yet every time his knees buckled and threatened to give out, he forced himself upright again. He stared directly at the tiny glow of light coming from her bedroom window, holding onto it as if it were the last lifeline keeping his soul tethered to the earth. "I won't leave you," he swore silently into the howling wind, his jaw locked tight through the shivering. "Even if I freeze out here, I won't walk away from you again." Through the entire night and into the glowing twilight of the following afternoon, for nearly 48 continuous hours, Jungkook stayed outside the locked gate, an unyielding monument to his own bitter regret.